Hello, and welcome to our webcast on what provosts think. This is our webcast on our 2022 survey of college and university chief academic officers, or provosts, and we're thrilled to have you with us. I'm Scott Jasek, editor of Inside Higher Ed. I'm joined by my fellow editor, Doug Letterman. We are going to walk you through this PowerPoint and also take some of your questions in the second half of this presentation. First, some housekeeping. We very much want your questions or comments. Use the Q&A box on your screen and feel free to add any context that you think may help us to answer your question. You're welcome to include your institution if you want, or your specific role if you want, but you don't have to. We only read aloud those questions that we're answering. So if your question isn't answered, you won't see it or hear it in the webcast, but we very much want your questions. Doug and I will, before we answer questions, we also want to get your reactions to all of this, and we are recording this webcast for those with hearing disabilities. So now we are ready to start. And as usual, okay. There's Doug's and my names and email addresses. Feel free to reach out about any issue, regardless of whether we talk about it today. The first, just want to talk about the methodology for the survey. There's only one answer per institution, so that way we kept it honest. At some institutions, the provost has a different title as the vice president for academic affairs. And then we use that person as the same. All answers are completely anonymous, but coded for sector. So on some issues, we can tell how many public or private provosts or community college provosts thought in a certain way. The survey was conducted for us by Hanover Research, and the survey was sponsored by CourseDog, APL Next Ed, Modern Campus, D2L, Interfolio, and the Honor Society of Phi Kappa Phi. We truly appreciate their support for this, but they have no role in the questions themselves. So the content is courtesy of them, but it's because of us. I'm having some issues here. Okay. So one question we always ask is we ask provosts about the academic health of their institution. We do not define academic health. So this is for the provost to decide what they consider important in the academic health of their institution. 32% of provosts said their institution was in excellent academic health. 54% said it was good. 12% said it was fair, and 2% said it was poor. The interesting thing there is those answers are pretty steady from recent years and do not appear to reflect any diminution of academic health because of the pandemic. Right now, we are coming out of the pandemic, at least in higher ed, and there is not a tremendous sense that the pandemic has hurt the academic health of the institutions, at least not from the provosts. If we ask the faculty, we'd probably hear something a little different. We also asked the provost to respond to the statement, changes made during the pandemic over the last 2 years have negatively impacted the academic quality of my institution. And here you do see some disagreement. Strong disagreement with this statement was by 22%, 39% disagreed, but 28% agreed and 12% strongly agreed. This is, at many institutions, faculty were cut, especially adjuncts. At many institutions, during the portions of the pandemic, the campus was empty as students all studied remotely. And at many institutions, many would say that did affect the quality of the academic health of the institution. But on the whole, the provost generally felt it didn't. And that is interesting. We also ask, and this is the provost to respond to which areas they believe their institutions are very effective at. And here we have a bit of a contradiction. Providing a quality undergraduate education is something that they are all, very sure that they can that they're providing. 65% said that answered yes. 52%, but then the numbers go down for some of the other categories. 52% said they're preparing students for the world of work. 45% said they are very effective at offering undergraduate support services. 39% said that they were very effective at identifying and assessing student outcomes. 31% answered that yes with controlling rising prices for students and families. And 22% said that they were very effective at recruiting and retaining talents on the faculty. The expectation, I think, is that if you're really great at a quality undergraduate education, I would expect some of these other numbers to be higher, and they're not. And that is something to consider at the institutions, particularly controlling rising prices. We surveyed the provosts before all of the talk about inflation, so that is probably worse now. And recruiting and retaining talented faculty is an issue that has come up since we asked them about the provost. Doug, would you like to add here?
Yeah, I would. And welcome to everybody. There's not just a disconnect in the provost minds in terms of the comparing some of these answers, but I think there's I think some of their answers, there's a real disconnect with what everybody else thinks, or a lot of people outside the institutions, especially I would say on the preparing students for work and controlling rising prices. I mean, we are seeing institutions under pretty intense pressure and intensifying questioning about the extent to which graduates are prepared for work and really ready to take especially a first job, but and have more than have the skills that employers of all different types want. And in terms of, and the provosts obviously aren't fully responsible for that or for the prices of their, whether their graduates are leaving with manageable debt, et cetera. But those are two issues on which, and again, the provosts aren't over the moon about their response here, but for them to say that they're very effective at doing these things, I think those numbers are probably higher than a lot of people would suggest.
Definitely. You'll have to forgive my computer is forcing me to try more than once when I want to advance the slides. We asked a series of questions about the liberal arts. And here we found that we
skipped a slide.
Skipped the slide, yes.
Yep.
On general education, we asked the provosts, what they thought of general education. 50% of provosts strongly agree that general education is a crucial part of undergraduate education, and 40% somewhat agreed. But only 2% of provosts strongly agree that students at my college understand the purpose of our general education requirements. 29% agreed somewhat, but 4% strongly agreed, and 34% somewhat disagreed. Here, I mean, my question is, if you really think that general education is so important, why are you low in the numbers who believe that students understand the purpose of our general education requirements? Students certainly understand that they have to take one course from column A and one course from column B, but that's not really understanding the purpose of general education. And I think the provosts are aware of that. I'm not sure if they want to do something about it. Then we turn to the liberal arts, and we asked the provost a series of questions about the liberal arts and the future of the liberal arts. In terms of the liberal arts is central to undergraduate education, even in professional programs, we had a very high percentage of the provosts who agreed. 47% strongly agreed, another 42% somewhat agreed. That's very significant because most of the provosts in our survey are not at liberal arts institutions, and they are responsible for a range of programs, not just the liberal arts. And then you can see the other answers. The concept of a liberal arts education is not well understood in the United States. 41% agreed, and 41% strongly agreed, 47% somewhat agreed. And that is also really important. In many colleges and universities, as budgets got tight, liberal arts departments, and particularly humanities departments, took major cuts. And I'm not arguing about those cuts here, but I'd say that to faculty members and others who are upset about those cuts, are you doing something about the fact that most people don't understand the liberal arts and why it's important? My institution is increasing attention on the ability of our degree programs to help students get good jobs. 35% strongly agreed and 52% somewhat agreed. Now, increasing attention to helping students get good jobs is not counter to the liberal arts, but it's not necessarily in support of the liberal arts either. And as that is a major focus, what will happen to liberal arts? Then this is another very important question. I expect to see the number of liberal arts colleges decline significantly over the next 5 years. We did not define significantly, but left that to the provost. 16% strongly agreed and 55% somewhat agreed. That is a very striking number in terms of the kinds of closures or mergers that provosts are expecting. And it's very important to think about. Politicians, presidents, and boards are increasingly unsympathetic to liberal arts education. 18% strongly agreed, 46% somewhat agreed. That is very much of concern frankly, to me and to others, because the provost presidents and board, the politicians, presidents, and boards are making the decisions on what will matter in the years ahead. We also asked them some other questions. High quality undergraduate education requires healthy departments in certain fields of the liberal arts, in English, history, political science, etc. 34% strongly agreed and 51% somewhat agreed. This is very interesting in light of cuts recently made in the liberal arts to those departments at many institutions. Even at institutions that are keeping those departments, are they being adequately supported? Many would question that. Politicians and board members are prioritizing STEM and professional programs over those that support liberal general education. 21% strongly agreed and 48% agreed. Again, this is an attitude problem that the provosts don't control, but is very important to consider for the future of the university. The number of students majoring in a program is an appropriate way to determine which departments to cut. Now, there was some disagreement. 6% strongly disagreed, 36% somewhat disagreed, but 5% agreed, strongly agreed, and 24% agreed. That should really concern a lot of people, a lot of the faculty, because this is increasingly how many universities are deciding what to cut. And that means that many departments that might be small are endangered, regardless of the value that they provide to the institution. We asked the provost about their spending priorities. Please indicate your level of agreement with the following statement. I anticipate major allocation of funds to the following categories in the next budget year. Professional and pre-professional programs, 14% strongly agreed, 53% somewhat agreed. STEM fields, very similar numbers, 15% strongly agreed, 51% somewhat agreed. Online programs, 13% strongly agreed, and 47% somewhat agreed. And then arts and sciences programs, 4% strongly agreed, only 26% somewhat agreed. Now, in terms of these questions, I realized that a lot of specific programs could fit into more than one category. They could be, STEM and online and in the arts and sciences department. But this was an effort to just sort of see what the provosts are thinking about things. And it should concern, I think it does raise some issues because it suggests the future is not necessarily as bright for arts and sciences as some of those other programs. And one question, or we asked several questions this year about mental health. Mental health has become a huge issue. It was a huge issue before the pandemic, but it's really been a huge issue during the pandemic. As many people have had mental health difficulties, and many institutions have become aware of them. So we asked, what amount of importance does your institution place on supporting faculty and staff mental health? 12% said it was extremely important, and 37% said it was very important. Moderately important got 36%, and not important at all, and somewhat important got 15%, not important at all got 1%. That is a very split decision in terms of whether the mental health concerns of faculty and staff are getting serious attention. And I'm not suggesting that the universities in any way take away what they're doing for students, because there is a clear problem for students there. And that's why many institutions are focusing on it. But I would question why many institutions aren't necessarily focusing it on others. To what extent do you agree or disagree with the following statement? My institution has formal plans to address the mental health needs among faculty and staff. 4% said it was extremely important. 33% said it was somewhat important, and then the other numbers. So this is also something on which the people who answered our survey are split. Doug, did you want to add here?
Yeah, I was just going to offer a little bit of a alternative point of view from the presidents, and it's interesting because you could probably make a case that the presidents maybe are more distant from the answer to this question than the provosts in certain ways. But we asked presidents in our survey of them in March, not exactly similar questions, but sort of related questions. And I would say that in general, the presidents expressed, we asked a set of questions around how aware the presidents were of the general state of mental health for different elements of their different constituents. And per the point Scott just made, the much more sort of awareness of, and in some ways concern about the mental health status of students, undergraduate students, which is unsurprising in many ways, just because they are, and sorry if this makes some of you uncomfortable, but they are the paying customer, and they have advocates in the form of parents and others who, if we're talking about traditional age students at least, who are going to make sure people hear about it if they don't feel the students are being taken care of. So I guess it's unsurprising, but I guess I agree with Scott that the answers to these questions to me don't reflect quite as much awareness of and concern about faculty and staff mental health as I tend to hear when we're talking to campus leaders. And so I find those numbers lower than I would have expected. But the presidents seemed to be expressing at least a little more awareness of and concern about mental health needs of faculty and staff than I think the provosts were.
Thank you. And mental health, another set of questions on mental health was asking, how would you rate your own level of awareness of the general state of mental health as it relates to following members of your community? For faculty, They said that they were very very aware of 65% said they were very aware, 33% said somewhat aware. Staff 44% very aware, and 52% somewhat aware. Undergraduates 53 and 43, and then graduate students was interesting to me because there have been many problems with graduate student mental health has been documented for some time now. And there the numbers were frankly lower than I would have expected. Only 25% said they were very aware, 42% said somewhat aware. So again, this relates to the issues that that come up in terms of will they adopt policies if their level of awareness isn't greater. So we also asked the provost about tenure and its alternatives. On the statement, tenure remains important and viable at my institution, 30% of provosts strongly agreed, and another 30% agreed somewhat. 50% said strongly disagreed. So that's 60% of provosts are answering yes to a question about tenure, that they value it and that it's important. But then we asked them another question. Asked if they favor or oppose a system of long-term contracts over the existing tenure system in higher education. 60% said they favored such a system. So, I mean, you look at the two questions together, and I think provosts are not necessarily going to lead the charge against a tenure, but they are open to it, and that's really important to say. While we didn't break down the answers this way, I suspect that provosts at more prestigious institutions, which tend to have stronger tenure systems than other institutions, were very much in the 40% of the second question. And this again suggests that people who really care about tenure have a lot of work to do in terms of getting strong support. Almost 3/4 of provosts, 73%, said their institution relies significantly on non-tenure track faculty for instruction. And most important, they don't anticipate that changing. And this again is no surprise, frankly, to me as I've been watching this, but it is it's really a reflection, I think, of the realities that face colleges and universities, that those that do rely on non-tenure track faculty perceive themselves not to have the money that it would cost to put more of them on the tenure track. There's always some excuses or that people use that you don't know if you're going to need a tenure track faculty member to teach some obscure topic, but most adjuncts don't teach obscure topics. Most adjuncts work teaching composition, mathematics, basic things that colleges offer every year. And there's no sense that that there's going to change in what they do. So I think adjuncts are going to be with us for some time. Then we also asked a question about graduate student unions. 38% of provosts said that graduate students should be allowed to unionize. And 96% of those who oppose unions say it's because of the principle that graduate students' primary role is as a student and their secondary role is as an employee. And I think that's interesting because it really gives a clear reason why the provosts are not going to necessarily cave on graduate student unions. Now, in many states, the provosts have no say on it. Ultimately, at a public college, the right to unionize is dictated by a state law or state governing board. At private colleges, it's governed by the NLRB. So it's not that it's dictated by the provost, but the provost can definitely influence the discussion and does do so. And at Indiana University right now, there are very strong disagreements with what the provost stand against a graduate student union, that the faculty wants to have the union rights. Doug, did you want to add here?
Yeah, all I would say is the provost may believe that believe in that principle, and I think there's obviously a logical rationale behind that. I'm not sure that's the way the law is. A lot of people are looking at it, and if you look around, and again, this is all going to vary depending on the which, especially if we're talking about federal law, which administration is in power, et cetera. But I think right now we are certainly seeing the idea, a more expansive view of who can qualify for being in a union, et cetera. I mean, we haven't seen this happen fully at the college athlete level, but I think there's especially with the Democratic administration in power for now, at least. I think the idea. I think in general, I would see the trend moving in the other direction. That anybody who's working meaningfully as part of their role is gonna probably maybe be viewed increasingly as employees rather than students. So the provost may be holding on to a principle that may be increasingly outdated.
I agree with that. Now we're going to switch to your questions. We want your questions on anything in the survey or your suggestions on what we should ask next year. I again want to thank CourseDog, APL Next Ed, Modern Campus, D2L, Interfolio, and the Honor Society of Phi Kappa Phi for supporting this survey. And now we'll turn to the questions. Doug, is there a first question?
Sure. Yeah. So somebody asked, can you comment on the theme of this article and what 2- and 4-year colleges should do about recent graduates' perceptions? And it was an article in Forbes recently, and there have been many like this about sort of college graduates having what this article called buyer's remorse, about sort of whether they felt, and this relates to the larger question about whether people feel the increasing questioning that we talked about a little earlier about the value of a degree, and whether people are prepared for the workforce and for life. And well, I said before that I think there's increased questioning of that, which I think there is. I don't think that colleges suddenly started being terrible at preparing people for work and life. Colleges have been partially responsible for doing that for a long time. And I think, what we have seen is a great expansion in the number of people with college over time, over the last decades, people with college credentials, and a great expansion of the number of people flowing into higher education. And anytime you widen that pool, you're going to probably have greater variation in how well prepared people are. But we've also seen changes in the expectations on the employer side, and people expecting perhaps sort of moving goalposts in terms of how well prepared college students are. And I do think we're in an era where a lot of employers don't want to necessarily be anybody's first employer, and they sort of have maybe overly heightened expectations for what graduates can do, et cetera. So I guess the way I would answer that question is in terms of the way the person who asked this question, comment on the theme of the article. Do I think that there is an increased perception that graduates aren't prepared for the workforce? Yes. Do I think there's a lot of questioning of graduates themselves about whether college was worth it? Yes. I think the price of higher education, the fact that many more people are taking out debt and that the debt is rising, et cetera, is significantly responsible for that. You're going to have higher expectations for what you get, and maybe judge it differently the more you pay for it, I think. But I don't necessarily think that means that colleges are doing a bad job educating and people for what's ahead. So in terms of what colleges should do about it and changing graduates' perceptions, I mean, I do think there are some things that institutions should be doing that would improve the preparation of their students and graduates for work. I think more institutions should be embedding into the curriculum actual skills that people are going to use in the workforce. And I think institutions already do quite a good job with many of the sort of higher order skills. I do think there's institutions, a lot of institutions prepare people well to think critically, et cetera. What I don't think they do on that side of things, on the higher order skills, is necessarily help graduates understand what they're learning. And so some of it is about the translation. Some of it is about making sure that a student in a particular course knows what outcomes the course is striving to produce for the students. It's going to help you communicate in these ways. It's going to help you think critically in these ways. And I think there's been a lot of movement in that direction of late. What I think the other thing that institutions can do, so some of it's about translation and making students aware of what they're getting from a course and from a program of study. The other is actually embedding somewhat more practical skills into the curriculum. And I'm not talking about having a separate course on using Excel, but making sure that assignments have students working in teams, which is one of the skills that employers really want to see. Having students do certain things that they're going to end up doing in the workplace, writing in certain kinds of ways. So I do think there's a lot of work that can be done on the curricular side to both improve the preparation of students for what's ahead and graduates' understanding of what they have already gained.
I've got two questions that sort of relate. Any thoughts on the following? At my institution, undergraduates really disliked classes on Zoom, but graduate students loved it and the flexibility. So what might provosts think of this going forward? There's another question asking about the future of online education. So first of all, it's very important not to assume that when students took online courses that were online only because they couldn't go to campus, particularly in that first semester, that's real online education. It was more like remote emergency education for the students. And it was great what colleges pulled together quickly, but it wasn't really good, high quality online education because it wasn't planned as online education. But that attitude very much is similar to what we are hearing generally, and also what we're seeing in trends in online enrollments. Generally, we are seeing much more interest in enrollment online from graduate students because they value the flexibility. They value they are older than undergrads, and they know why they're there. You don't get a master's degree or PhD or law degree or medical degree just because. You get it for a reason. And while they too value in-person instruction, and I think with them, the big growth area will be hybrid programs that have some of both. They are much more able to make the choices that will make them good online students. Undergraduates, and here I'm going to generalize, and so please forgive me if you are an undergraduate listening or relate to undergraduates. Undergraduates are not as mature, don't have as much experience. In many cases, undergraduates are people are not necessarily rich. They may not have a place to study that is quiet. And there are all kinds of reasons for them why the undergraduate experience, why they don't want to be online. And a big part of it is also undergraduate education also includes a lot that's not in the classroom. Students get to know one another, get to do things together, et cetera, et cetera. And that isn't going to take place as much online. So, I think when we look at the enrollment, It's not that I think undergraduate enrollment online is going to disappear. It's definitely has a market. And in certain areas, it's going to be quite popular. But I suspect we're going to see a higher rate of growth in graduate education. And that I think provosts will have to deal with that, because it's very important that they get the faculty who may be able to teach an undergraduate in person and graduate students online, and to really teach graduate students online, not just to move a lecture course online. Doug?
Yeah, I want to just add a quick couple things on that. I'll put an even finer point on it. Most undergraduates, at least those who had chosen to study in person before, didn't like what they got, and it's not surprising. None of the courses that institutions pivoted to were built to be online, and the students weren't studying online by choice. Over time, the person who asked that initial question followed up to say undergrads still disliked Zoom in the following semesters when faculty had more experience with it. But I would say on balance, despite all the work that institutions did to sort of train faculty, true online courses are built from the beginning to be online and to enable significant interaction between instructors and students and among students. And they're built to embed active learning in online settings. And so, there was actually more lecturing, I suspect, in the pandemic era remote learning than we've seen a reasonable beginning, at least, of transition away from the lecture as the primary or especially sole form of and active learning is what students want, kind of period. And finding ways to do that in online as well as in person takes a ton of work. And I think a lot of instructors who didn't set out to be online teachers still haven't necessarily undertaken the hard work of turning courses into really strong virtually delivered courses. So anyway, I want to shift a little bit. Somebody asked, do you think if colleges and universities don't change as the higher education market evolves, that more for-profit higher education online institutions such as Walden University, University of Phoenix, and Capella University will begin to increasingly dominate the market? No, I don't. I think we may. First of all, I agree with Scott. For undergraduate education, I do not believe that fully online is likely to become the dominant way of delivering. I think what we're seeing, what we've started to see, and what I think we'll continue to see is much more work at blending elements of instructional delivery. Scott was right to separate the graduate from the undergraduate. Graduate education and place-bound people who do not want to be residential, that number is growing. And I do think we will see more and more. I mean, we're seeing the number of potential residential students shrink. We lost more than 1 million students in the last couple of years, some of whom were residential, some of whom are not. But the demographic decline that awaits is among those likeliest to be residential students, the 18 to 22-year-olds. And so institutions almost by design are going to be dealing more and more, if they're going to survive, with older students and others who are likeliest to need or demand the flexibility of being able to study. But the for-profits, they're not disappearing, but their days are, their heyday has passed. First of all, there are far fewer of them than there used to be. Many of them are transitioning to become nonprofits. There is a lot of growth in fully online nonprofit institutions like Southern New Hampshire University and Western Governors University that have pivoted well to serve adults. Those may eat the lunch of institutions that don't change, but I don't think it's going to be really about the for-profits.
Here's another question on online education. Online education is more cost effective for higher ed institutions in the long run. Do you see more traditional colleges and universities moving toward online courses, especially graduate programs? Well, definitely they're moving for graduate programs, but I want to push back a little bit on the assumption in the first sentence that online education is more cost effective for higher ed institutions. Online education can be more cost effective if you are just, putting on somebody's video of their lectures, but good online education requires student interaction with faculty members. Those faculty members may not have PhDs, they might have PhDs. They may be different kinds of, have different kinds of backgrounds, but there is a fundamental desire by students to truly interact with their faculty online and in person. And so I think that the assumption is largely based on colleges ignoring or would be based on colleges ignoring that reality. And so I think that the savings that colleges get are much smaller than assumed. Now, will some colleges move ahead anyway and make these cuts? Of course. But I don't think those are the online programs that will truly succeed with today's students. Doug?
Yeah, this is a question that sort of asks whether the provosts are living on the moon. How do you square these rosy answers? 86% good to excellent academic health, 61% pandemic has had no negative effect, 65% very effective quality undergraduate education, with 5 semesters of declining enrollment and a weighted national first-time on-time grad rate dropout rate of 50%. If quality is so high, why are outcomes so middling and students stopping out / not enrolling? Do provosts believe the causes are outside of their control? I think there's more we can do. So there's a lot in there, obviously. Listen, there are a ton of factors, a ton of reasons why enrollments are falling over the last five semesters, and actually it's a longer period than that if you go all the way back. And yes, it's true that there is, we still have a pretty comparatively small proportion of people who enroll in higher education completing. I think I do believe that I think there's a tendency of a lot of leaders in higher ed to have overly rosy perceptions of their situations. I felt that way about our president's survey a couple months ago, and I think the provost also aren't necessarily seeing and acknowledging some of the warning signs. But I think there's and I think there is a lot that institutions need to do, and I tried to talk about that. I think though, I guess I'm not 100% sure that I think there are a lot of reasons why enrollments are falling that don't have much to do with the quality of what institutions are doing. There's a huge number of factors that affect, but I think, listen, higher education is under pressure as it's never been to prove its value and to prove that the outcomes are strong. And I think there's a ton of work to do. And I think there is a lot that institutions can do to improve what they do and to help graduates and non-graduates become graduates and help graduates succeed more. So I don't disagree with the questioner's premise, and I do think that campus leaders, I do worry that if campus leaders think things are great, they won't necessarily undertake the hard work to make the changes that are necessary.
I very much agree. What do you make of the dichotomy in terms of recognizing the importance of liberal arts education, but anticipating a decline over the next 5 years? What are the ways liberal arts can attract more students or improve their value proposition? So I think that, the reason they are answering that way is they are smart people looking at what's going on. There's a section of liberal arts colleges, your Williams, Amherst, Swarthmore, Pomona, that are doing quite well and will continue to do quite well. But you go much below that, and the liberal arts college is in trouble. Many colleges that call themselves liberal arts colleges aren't liberal arts colleges, in terms of, you can't really be a liberal arts college and have your top major be business. That doesn't mean business is a bad major, but it's just not a liberal arts college, even though some liberal arts colleges are somewhat slow to make that point. The colleges that are successful, that have attracted more students, have been very rigorous about it and have gone about it department by department, and also recognizing that what people most value about a liberal arts education may not, in fact, be the liberal arts. So there was a book that we wrote about several years ago that tried to analyze what were measures of success for alumni 5, 10, and 30 years after graduation. And graduates of liberal arts colleges did much better than others because they had the team skills Doug was talking about. They could speak, they could write well, they interacted with groups. And a more recent example would be from Wake Forest University, which is not a liberal arts college, but which in its liberal arts disciplines, and I think its other disciplines, each department is required to track down their graduates and their recent graduates and find out what they're doing. And then to share that information, not with names because of FERPA, of course, but share that information with the students. And what they are finding out is that art history majors aren't necessarily all going into art history. There's a tremendous ignorance, frankly, in the public about what it means to be a history major, which I was. And I use my knowledge of history, but I'm not doing history work every day. And I think it's going to really require that. Now, in terms of the number of liberal arts colleges declining, I think they will decline over the next 5 years. I'm not sure by what percentage. I'm not sure if that's going to be terrible to liberal arts colleges, because I think there will be more of an alignment between the supply and demand, frankly, and that those that remain are going to be those that have a strong sense of what they are and why they are. Doug?
Yeah, I would just add a couple thoughts on this. I mean, I'm probably less. There's a difference between the liberal arts disciplines and liberal arts departments and the traits that and skills and outcomes that one associates with the disciplines. And I think why students are, I think there are good and bad reasons why we're seeing students, and to a large extent parents, push students into sort of what disciplines that appear to be more practical. And but it's mostly around it's some of what Scott said about sort of understanding what graduates of specific disciplines go on to do. But it's also going back to what I said before. I think the typical graduate of a liberal arts discipline hasn't been told and shown, not shown and made aware of, given the language to describe to an employer what he or she has learned and what the work that they've done has made them capable of doing. Because when you look at what employers are really looking for, yes, they do want somebody to walk in and be able to use a pivot table in Microsoft Excel. and maybe do a little bit of coding or whatever. And so some of them are really are sort of practical skills, but a lot of it is to, again, work in teams, be able to connect dots in and analyze, and to be able to absorb information then and explain it back in a simpler, clearer way. Those are the skills that a strong liberal arts curriculum, and again, whether it's in a major that is a traditional liberal arts major, again, I don't want to get the historians and English folks all up in arms, but the skills that the type of learning can happen in lots of different ways, and we should be embedding liberal arts approaches and liberal arts work designed to develop the liberal arts skills in all sorts of disciplines. So I don't know. It's not that I'm not worried about it, but this is a crisis of 40 or 50 years and not now. And B, I think I do think a lot of it is about being much more purposeful about explaining and embedding into the curriculum the sort of understanding of what students are gaining.
Okay, one other question. We have time for. Many universities rely on tuition dollars from international students. Their enrollment has declined. How do you think this will play out over time, given the discussion regarding preparation for jobs, online education, et cetera? I think this is one of the key questions that we have in terms of what is going to happen with the pandemic. Many people want the pandemic to be over. Obviously, everyone wants the pandemic to be over, but it may not be over. And in terms of people who are confident that it's going to be over, they are, hopefully they're right, but they're probably fooling themselves. Look at the spread of this virus. We have no idea where it's going to pop up next or with what variation, or et cetera. And the visas, it's one thing that, there are definitely students who want to come to the United States. A lot of students want to come to the United States, but it's unclear that we are going to let them in or let them in the same numbers that they were enrolled prior to the pandemic. And that is a huge tuition question, as this questioner knows. And so I think many colleges and universities are going to be disappointed this fall in the number of students that they'll get from abroad, or they will have to focus on specific groups of international students, those who are already in the United States, rather than their general approach. And so I think it's going to be very tricky. And now there'll still be lots of international students, but in terms of their numbers, I think it's going to be very tricky. I think that's all the time we have today for questions. I want to thank the sponsors, CourseDog, APLU, APL Next Ed, Modern Campus, D2L, Interfolio, the Honor Society of Phi Kappa Phi, and thank all of you for listening this afternoon. Thank you. Goodbye.